The MBTA and Transit Matters are conducting a survey on overnight service for a possible successor to the service that was discontinued earlier this year. To tell us about the survey is our guest from Transit Matters, the president and co-founder, Mark Ibunya. Thank you very much for being with us, Mark.
Thank you for having me.
First of all, talk about why we're doing this survey now, because there has been some thinking done already about these proposals,
Right.
but why ask for more information?
Well, so we've been working with the MBTA staff pretty much for ongoing for the entire year, ever since we came up with the proposal, and they approached us to refine that. And so the reason why we're doing a survey now is because the FMCB, the Fiscal Management Control Board that manages the MBTA, wants to know more about what they're getting into and what the overall need is for an overnight service before they engage in any further conversations about a pilot.
In the populations here, I mean, it could be people who are having fun on the weekends. It can also be people who Monday through Friday, they're in the night shift.
Right.
They got to get to work.
Right. That's exactly the reason why we're proposing this. And so, again, the distinction between the past two extensions of service, the Night Owl, which ran from 2001 to, I believe, 2006, and also the last late night service, is that those two only extended the service for an additional 2 hours, 2 nights a week, Friday night and Saturday night, which works, yeah, for those, I guess, night owls, folks who are, I guess, folks who look a lot like me, young folks who are going out to drink and, enjoy themselves on a night out. But, what about the people who are helping to make those nights work for us? The folks who work in the kitchens, who work in the bars, who continue to work in those establishments until after the tea closes. How do they get home? And how do they get home any other time of the week? Because bars aren't only open on Friday nights and Saturday nights. So
plus, you get people who have to be someplace very, very early in the morning to
Right.
make sure the other early people come in and it's up and running.
Yeah. Well, I mean, not just people going to work. So yeah. So like airport, at Logan Airport, there are shifts that begin right before when when the first flights leave Logan Airport. I believe we counted there's an average of about 50 flights that leave at around 7 o'clock, and that requires you to be at the airport 2 hours early. How are you getting there? I think the majority of people, plunk down $20 or however much to get a taxi to the airport. So.
What have you learned from the failures of the past with the Night Owl service? I know that's not a fair comparison, but there was this pattern of declining ridership. The revenue didn't look good. So, what did you learn from that?
Right. Well, so the biggest challenge right now is justifying the cost. And in the past, in the two previous trials where we extended service, the service was looked at through the lens of subsidy, which is how we evaluate other routes when the time comes that we have to close our almost annual budget gap, and what we're learning now is that we have to have a better metric for deciding is this service usable, and do we need to continue paying for it in spite of the cost? I think the other problem is that it might not have been cost effective to only run service for 2 hours, 2 nights, extra 2 hours, 2 nights a week. So for an additional 4 hours a week, we were paying for the last number was $13 million. And I think the biggest issue with declining ridership was because we were cutting back service hours in an attempt to try to save the service, because it was costing X amount of money, and we kept having to revisit the question year after year. The question is, how much are we willing to pay for that for service, and who needs it? And the people who need it are not going to be the people who can pay a surcharge. These are the people who can't do Uber every single night to get from home to work.
Chris, the other thing at least at the early stage of planning is that you look at these different kinds of service vehicles. I mean, before we had rapid transit, now more talk about buses, maybe even these other vehicles that private companies are using.
Right. So we're open to the ideas, and we believe that the MBTA should choose the option that gives them the most value for their buck. Though the concern with the private vehicles is accessibility. The thing that we pay for as a Commonwealth for MBTA vehicles is lowering the physical barriers for folks who do have physical disabilities. So that's going to be a challenge for any private operator to be able to come onto the scene, whether it's Bridge, whether it's some other company. So some other companies do have traditional buses that can accommodate that. So we're interested to see what happens next year if the FMCB decides to do a pilot. Now, as far as whether or not we're including subways versus bus, that's the biggest factor in the cost. Is it does cost a lot of money to run the subway, which is not what was happening with Night Owl, but we did extend the subway with late night. So now the goal here is to close the service gap between 1 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the morning just with buses, but not hobbling together some network where the buses are trying to replicate the subway network, but rather we're trying to take the buses that run through the neighborhoods where we see the majority of people trying to take advantage of very, very early trips. So the first trips out of the garages that see the network with buses, a lot of those actually do run very, very full, like the 111 that goes out to Chelsea, or rather 111 from Chelsea into Haymarket, and all of these other buses where folks are either trying to get to work or trying to get off of a shift.
We're talking with Mark Ibunya from Transit Matters. Mark, about this survey, it occurs to me that this is a great way to show what people want, but I guess it's also it's a way for people to show that they really want the service too. Right.
Yeah, so the survey is, for the limited amount of time that we did have to create the survey and figure out how we were going to collect that information, yes, it's a really great way for us to figure out what is our baseline for the need, for the people, for the interest, and beyond that, what are the trips that people are making right now? Because in reality, the data that our government agencies and organizations have right now this is a huge gap of information. We don't know largely where people are going, what are the trips that they're making between 1 and 5, how are restaurants getting home, and actually not restaurants, the restaurant workers, yes. And so actually that's one of the biggest reasons why the Massachusetts Restaurant Association has been working with us, the City of Boston, City of Cambridge, and the MBTA, is because this is in the interest of them being able to have people who can work at their establishments and the members.
And finally, people want to plug into the survey. What's the best way to find it?
So they can go to mbta.com/nightbus, NIGHTBUS, and they can go there. One of the other concerns that we have right now with the survey is that because we had such limited time, we didn't have time to share that in paper forms and have that out in physical form for communities who may not necessarily be connected. So that's one of our concerns about that we might find out through the data, or that we might have to factor in what's not present in the survey results.
Thank you very much for being with us.
No, of course, thank you.
Mark Ibunya from Transit Matters. Up ahead, we'll hear about this year's production of Black Nativity.